So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone who has shown up. Sorry for the 5-minute late start. We are dealing with some technical difficulties in making sure that we are able to get all of our slides up here. So my name is Joel Ramirez. I'm the director of USMLE tutoring here at MedSchoolCoach, which means it's my goal to connect you with excellent tutors to help you reach your goals when it comes to step 1, step 2, and all your coursework. So we went ahead and put this together, this short webinar today, to kind of give you guys some information from people who have a lot of experience doing this. And so we went ahead and invited James, Faustine, and then myself here to talk. And then Dr. Mehta was also going to be joining us and giving us a perspective from a program director. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Here are going to be our hosts. These are the hosts that I just mentioned. That's me on the left side of the screen, Dr. Mehta in the middle, Faustine, who is a 4th-year medical student at UCSF on the right, and then James Farah, who is a 3rd-year medical student at SGU. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start off with just a question. There is a little Q&A. There you go. We're going to go ahead and start off with a question. What year in medical school are you?
And where are you in medical school? I threw in that where if we have some internationals, some US Med students in the group. So we just want to get a mix of where everybody is.
Okay, so it looks like most students are US medical students and then some international medical students and currently no graduated medical school students here. Okay, excellent. So this is just going to be a brief introduction to the webinar, some things that we're going to go over here. So we'll give you a little bit of overview. We'll briefly talk about the exam, what the exam is. And in this webinar, we're specifically going to focus on step 1, although we also commonly provide tutoring for step 2 and also just for your coursework during medical school. So if you're having troubles with a particular subject or multiple subjects, we can help you with that as well. We'll go over to Dr. Mehta, who will give us a program director's perspective, and then we'll have both James and Faustine talk about creating a study schedule, choosing resources, utilizing resources, and then I'll talk a little bit about common pitfalls in preparing for step 1, and then talk about what we can do to help you be successful. And then we'll end with a question and answer in which we'll be able to answer your guys' questions. So as we move along, if you have questions about anything, feel free to drop a note in the little question and answer tab within Zoom, and then we'll make sure we get to them by the end. So a little bit about the exam. This is probably the easiest information to get, but it is a long exam, a very grueling exam. There's 7 one-hour blocks, about 40 questions per block, which leaves you about 90 seconds per question. It usually makes for about an 8-hour day. So out of those 7 one-hour blocks, you then get an additional 15 minutes for a tutorial at the beginning, and then an additional 45 minutes of break time. Most students choose to skip through the tutorial because it's nothing. Most of the information presented in the tutorial you can find elsewhere, and that way you're able to give yourself about an hour of break. All questions are worth the same number of points, and there's absolutely no penalty for guessing. So oftentimes when we're working with students, we focus on strategies that not only help you find the right answer, but help you rule out the wrong answers. Sometimes being lucky is better than being smart. On the bottom, a passing score is going to be a 194, and then you see our standard, about 1 standard deviation out will be a little bit above, under a 250, and then 2 standard deviations would be approximately above a 270. So we have another question for you. How important do you think step 1 is for residency selection? Kind of the big question.
I changed the question up a little bit here and said, what factor is the single most important in residency selection? Let's see what people say, and then I'll share my experience on that. Awesome.
So it looks like most people think step 1 is the most important factor for residency selection. So, there are multiple important factors, but I think, step 1 plays a very important part, and we'll go ahead and turn it over now to Dr. Mehta, who will give you his experience perspective on the residency selection and the importance of step 1.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. So, unfortunately, I can't give you guys too much advice on taking step 1 anymore because it's been about 15 years since I took step 1 myself. So I remember very little of the actual content, and that tells you a little bit about the importance of step one in day-to-day clinical medicine. But I can talk a little bit about the importance of step one from a residency perspective. And obviously, at the end of the day, everybody's goal in here is to get through a residency that they want, whether that's to get any residency, whether that's to get into the specialty of their choice, whether that's to get into the program of their choice and the location of their choice. Obviously, all of you guys out there are really trying to get the best residency you can at the end of the day. So residency may be 3 years away for a lot of you because you're still in your first year of medical school and your second year of medical school, but I can't stress the importance of step one enough in residency selection. I've read thousands of residency applications, thousands of fellowship applications at this point. And the reason that step one is so important is because all the other things that go into a program or a application on ERAS are what I call non-filterable. So you have the personal statement, you have your dean's letter, you have letters of recommendation, you have honors and awards, research and publications. Every one of those things is important, don't get me wrong. But none of those things from a program director's perspective on ERAS, so we log into a system where we can actually see everybody's score and everybody's application. It looks just like this. I can't sort by anything other than step one score and step two score. And so you can see how easy it is for me to sit there and just sort by step one score and kind of look at the top applicants first. And unfortunately, the people who don't have a great step one score get looked at last. So what I call step one is just a filterable result, right? It's the only thing that I can filter. One of the very few things that I can filter when I look at people's applications. And when I have 200 applications to review in a day, it's very easy for me to filter and kind of pick out the ones that I want to look at and exclude the ones I don't want to look at. So that step one score is just enormously important in the entire process. You can see again up here, we have kind of the sort by step one. Again, this is actually a screenshot of what it looks like from a program director's perspective when they're reviewing applicants. So without a doubt, step one score is, if not the most important thing, one of the most important things that you will do for your residency. So really maximizing your score is just so important. And I tell, I work with a lot of med students, I work with a lot of pre-meds, and of all of them, I tell them that the most important test of your life is USMLE Step 1. You can take the MCAT multiple times. You can get into, a lot of people take the MCAT twice, 3 times to get into med school. Obviously a huge step. But step one, as long as you pass, you only take it once. And if you don't pass, you have other issues. But you only take step one once. And that score really determines what you can do. It determines if you can be an orthopedic surgeon, if you want to be one. It determines if you're going to have to, go into a non-competitive specialty that you may not want to go into. Or it determines where you're going to go. Maybe you end up in a non-desirable location for you. So the difference of a great step one score and a low step one score is just enormous for you as an applicant. I mean, I can't stress enough how important it is at the end of the day. So, I will turn it over to now some of the experts in step one, because as I said, it's been a long time since I've taken it, and resources have certainly changed. Believe it or not, we barely had we didn't have too many electronic resources when I was going through. And now you guys have a plethora of things. And I'm going to turn it over to these guys. I just wanted to encourage you guys again to use that question and answer function so that we can answer questions. I'm happy to answer questions on residency selection, fellowship selection, all those kind of things as time goes on and we go through the webinar as well. So use that question and answer session. Joel, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Mehta. So we're going to go to our next question is, have you started studying yet? So it is now towards the end of October, and traditionally people take the exam, it's a little variable per school, but usually around March or April. So the question is, have you started studying yet, or when do you plan on studying? So it sounds like the majority of people have kind of started studying. So maybe dabbled in some resources, maybe looked at some videos. A smaller portion has not started studying, and then the smallest portion has started studying. So we're going to go ahead and then delve into talking about when to start studying, and then more importantly, how to start studying. So I'm now going to turn it over to Ramirez, who is a 4th-year medical student at UCSF. has done exceptionally well in step 1 and step 2, and then has tutored several students and helped them really achieve the scores that they were interested in. She's going to be talking to you about daily study schedules, how to use a Qbank, examples of a study guide, and how to use MD.
Great, thanks, Joel. Can you guys hear me okay? So I think there are different study schedules for different time periods. And I'm going to talk about creating a study schedule for your dedicated study time. And every student has a different amount of weeks depending on, you know, what medical school you're at and where you're at in your training. But generally people have between 4 to 6 weeks. And that's typically what we would recommend for kind of a dedicated study period. So this is what I recommend to students that I work with, and a strategy that was really effective for me. I always recommend starting out your day with some sort of exercise. It can be light, moderate, intense, but just something to get your heart pumping, get your brain working. And I found that my studying was more effective after some sort of exercise, even if it was just, you know, a walk for 20 or 30 minutes. In the morning, I first start with a review of some UWorld notes, and then I jump into 2 UWorld blocks. And I recommend doing blocks timed and random subjects. And I'll do those 2 blocks back to back because you're always wanting to work on stamina. And then in the afternoon for a 4 to 6 hour period, I would review those UWorld blocks. And people always ask, you know, how long should I spend reviewing blocks? How long should it take me to review one block? And I think that for step 1, it should usually take around 2 to 3 hours per block. So it takes a significant amount of time. But even more so than doing the blocks, the questions themselves, reviewing them is really where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And so that should be the bulk of your studying for the day, is going to be reviewing those UWorld blocks. People also ask, you know, how long should my study day be? And during the dedicated period, we typically recommend 10 to 14 hours. So it's a really intense period, but that's why it's usually no longer than 4 to 6 weeks, is because, you know, burnout is real, and you want to make sure that you build in some time, you know, whether it's a half day off a week to kind of rejuvenate yourself. But it is a really intense period. So this schedule right here is about 12-hour days. And that can, you know, range depending on your day between 10 and 14 hours. In the evening, this is when I would recommend reviewing flashcards. And typically subjects that I recommend using flashcards for are micro, biochem, and then medications, you know, mechanism of action and toxicities. And then reviewing the UWorld notes that you've taken when you review those blocks, which I'll talk about more. So this puts you at about a 12-hour day and gives you about 7.5 hours of sleep. And I think that's what I would recommend during this really intense period. Next, I'll talk about how to use the Qbank. UWorld is a golden resource, but if it's used incorrectly, it's not the most efficient. So one of the ways to be the most efficient with UWorld and with any Qbank is to triage the questions and the answers, because everyone is going to have different strengths and weaknesses. And if you spend the same amount of time on all the questions, you're not using your time the most efficiently. You know, you want to spend more time on your weak areas and less time on things you're already strong at. So I teach kind of a 3-point system, or sometimes I call it like red, orange, and green system, where a red question, or this first one, would be, you know, it was the hardest thing. I had no idea what was going on. I really couldn't figure it out. Somewhere in the middle, so maybe a moderate or an orange, would be, you know, I got the point of the question. I knew what they were asking me, but I narrowed it down to 2 and I really couldn't figure out. I couldn't choose between the 2, or it was 50-50 chance. And then a green would be, I really had the hang of this topic. I knew what they were asking me, but I made a really silly mistake that I'm not going to make again. And the goal of this ranking system is to be more efficient, to spend more time reviewing those red and orange topics and less time reviewing the green topics. And while you're reviewing, you'll be making a study guide based on the wrong answers. And we recommend organizing this by subject. So for example, having a study guide on GI and on cardio, on POLM based on questions you got wrong. And, you know, some people want to type it. Some people recommend writing it by hand. For me, I'm the kind of person that really learns by writing things down. So I recommend writing this by hand. And this will be a really golden resource. So I want to talk a little bit more about this study guide. So this is one example of, you know, what the study guide would look at. The point of this is not for you to to copy exactly what's written here, but is to realize that the more concise you are, the more efficient you'll be with your studying, because it'll take you less time to write down a bullet point than to write down a whole paragraph on what you got wrong, and it'll be more quick to review, more efficient to review. So I recommend using bullet points, being very concise, and really focusing on the high yield material and gaps in your knowledge. And that's why everyone's study guide is going to look different. It might be really long for GI if that's a weak area and really short for POLM, or it might have a lot on one topic. Say you've been ignoring, studying pleural effusions because you really don't like those Lights criteria. Well, you might have several bullet points on that, but then less so on COPD or something else because you're better at that already, or you learned it better in your preclinical years. So this is just an example to show you what that study guide could look at. And then I recommend a strategy that I used during both my preclinical years and STEP studying about how to use this study guide to review your weak areas. So next I'll talk about how to use the study guide. So if we could switch to the next slide. Are we able to switch to the next slide? Can you still hear me? I can't hear you anymore.
Joel, it looks like
there we go.
Joel may have gotten frozen there, so I'm going to take over and share my screen. And
looks like he's back, maybe?
He's back, but still a little frozen there.
Oh, okay.
So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see if that takes us through. It should work just fine. Here we go. Can you see my screen now?
No, I can't. Well, I can talk about it and then we can, once Joel gets back on. So the way I teach this strategy is the key here is repetition, 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 repetition. So I recommend using a different color pen for each day of the week. So, blue for Monday, red for Tuesday, green for Wednesday, etc. And then the idea is that you'll review these notes a total of 4 times. So the first time I want you to review them is the evening of before you go to bed. So say you're reviewing your notes on a Monday. So, and this slide might not be in your slide deck, Dr. Mehta, because I had added it. But the idea is that Monday night you would review Monday's notes. Then you would review those same notes the next day. So you would also review them the Tuesday afternoon during that afternoon or evening period. And you would review them again on Wednesday, and then you would review them at the end of the week. So say on Sunday afternoon. And then you repeat that cycle the next day. So then on Tuesday, you would be reviewing Tuesday's notes in the evening, as well as the notes from the day before. So as well as Monday's. And then as the cycle kind of repeats. So you're going to see each set of notes on 3 consecutive days, Monday evening, the next day, and the day after. And then you would see all of the notes from that week on one day at the end of the week. So say Sunday afternoon, and you would review the entire week's notes. So this allows you to see these notes for a total of 4 times each week, and then you repeat the cycle the next week. And so here it's really repetition, repetition, and that's key because these are the high yields points that were your weak areas. And you're able, the more times you see them, the more they'll get ingrained. And then finally, I'd like to talk about practice tests and NBMEs. So these are both, a way to evaluate your performance and a learning tool. So in general, for step 1, we say that NBMEs are going to be a little bit closer to your predicted score than the UWorld self-assessments, plus or minus 5 to 10 points. And what I recommend is simulating the entire test day experience. So taking the practice test at the exact same time as your test is scheduled to start, and planning out when you're going to take your breaks, what snacks and food you're going to eat. So simulate the exact test day experience, and that helps you build stamina. It also builds confidence because you know what to expect. You know exactly when you're going to take those breaks, you know, when you're going to have a time to have a bite to eat or a sip of coffee. And, you know, for me, it's a way of controlling the controllables, because there's a lot of things on test day that are not going to be controllable. What shows up on your test, who's sitting next to you, you know, how loud they're using their clicker, but you can control these controllables, and that helps you build confidence and reduces test day anxiety. And so the last point is that I would recommend taking one NBME right before your dedicated time, and then anywhere from, you know, 2 to 3, depending on how much time you have during your dedicated time, and using those scores to kind of guide your studying subsequently.
Great, thank you, Faustine. So now we'll go ahead and switch over to James, who will be talking to you guys next. He's going to be talking about creating a daily study schedule, content planning, and how to use practice tests, as well as things he wished he had known.
Hi guys, I hope you can hear me all right. So Ms. Ramirez did say a lot of good advice. I'm going to be reiterating a lot of stuff she said, but I'm also going to give my take on some things. So I'd like to first talk about how to approach a Qbank. So like Ms. Ramirez said, you know, UWorld is a very daunting question bank to start tackling. It's about, what, 2,300 questions. But, you know, you've heard it multiple times, but I'm going to say to you again that UWorld really is the gold standard. My advice to you is everyone who is going to be taking step 1 soon should get through that question bank twice. Once during the final term or the final semester of their year 2, and then another time during the dedicated study time. So like I said, there's a ton of information in UWorld. A lot of stuff is a little bit more than you probably need to know. But like I said, the best thing to go about with UWorld for me is going over the wrong answers, and like Faustine said, is not spending too much time over the right answers. And what I did was I made an Excel sheet gone by subject, and what I did was every wrong answer that I put, I would make like a little factoid, and I called it my smart book, and then I would review it every weekend, every single thing that I've gotten wrong through UWorld. And I can tell you that probably 10 or 15 just straight factoids that I memorized doing that showed up on my test. So if you're finding yourself struggling to finish UWorld or staying on schedule, you know, we like to say we have to sacrifice a low yield UWorld question. So, you know, if you really, really know cardio, there really isn't too much good for you if you're going to just do cardio questions, right? You should definitely focus on the topics that you're weakest on. And another thing I wanted to say is for UWorld, a lot of people try to focus on the right answer, but like how Faustine said, you know, one of the main strategies that you can do in step 1 is eliminating the wrong answer, because they love throwing distractors. They love throwing answers that look like the right answer, and it's your job and it's your skill that you're going to sharpen in order to pick out those wrong answers and know which one's right. Can we go to the next slide, please? So like Mr. Ramirez said, she kind of showed like a basic schedule. So 5 a.m. is pretty early, but I like to be done really early. So I like to be in bed by 9:30. So typically I wake up at 5, go to library or Starbucks. You know, you start with an hour of Ankis. I really like Anki, just how they keep the information that you get wrong coming back frequently. So it just kind of builds that memory. You have 2 hours of dedicated first aid review. The problem with first aid is you have to be on top of yourself and make sure that you're not passively reading. You need to make sure that you're actively reading it and actively trying to retain the information. Also, I use some doctors in training videos. I did 2 to 3 blocks of UWorld on tutor mode. I personally like tutor mode because I never really had a problem with time. But if you're the type of person who's going to the last second on your test, definitely do the timed questions, because you need to build up that stamina and you need to build up that practice in order to finish your test on time. And like I said, I took my exam on a Sunday. So not really the normal exam time or exam day to take it on, but I just wanted to take it on a Sunday. Like Faustine said, you take your practice exams every single Sunday at the exact same time. In the exact same setting. As much as you can simulate that setting, that's what you need to do. Whatever you're going to eat, whatever you're going to drink, you need to make it, because familiarity, there's comfort in familiarity. And honestly, UWorld makes it really they do a really good job of making it look exactly like the Step 1 software. So by the time I got to Step 1, I was already tired of the software. So to me, that was just, that kind of got rid of the nerves and the anxiety for me, just to see that sort of familiarity. Also, it's kind of late, it's a little early for this, but when you, the day before the test, you know, you always got to exercise, meal prep, rest. Definitely don't study the day before the test. That's definitely one of the biggest things. But during your dedicated study time, definitely make sure that you have some mindfulness, have some time to yourself, because, you know, I ended up moving my test up a week because, like Faustine said, the burnout is real. I definitely felt those signs and symptoms of burnout, and I ended up having to move my test up because I was just so tired of studying. So definitely know what kind of person you are in terms of studying and how much energy you have during the day. Definitely plan for if you're going to get burnt out, what you're going to do about that and how you're going to change it up. And if we can go to the next slide, please.
I will jump in there and say just for a second, the burnout thing was, it's one of the few things I remember from Step 1 was how burnt out I was at the end of Step 1 studying, and how when I was done with it and I came back to the world, it was almost like, wow, welcome back world. Like I hadn't seen people, I hadn't been out for so long. I hadn't, you know, even I went outside to Panera and study, but that was it. It was huge to be done with it. And it's funny, you know, 12 years later, the only thing you remember is how burnt out you were studying for that test.
Definitely. And like you said, like once you come out of the test, you're like, well, what do I do now? Because you spent so much time studying for this test. One of the most important things is getting a content plan. I want to spend a little bit of time on this. First aid is also one of the gold standards for studying for this test, you know, along with UWorld. So for however kind of studying person you are, what I recommend is seeing what you're weakest at and making those first aid sections a priority. But you have a certain number of pages and a certain number of questions you need to get through in a certain amount of time. So what you need to do is you need to take the amount of days you have to study and the amount of questions you have and the amount of pages you have and just break it up day by day, and then just set in some break days, however many you feel like you need. You can divide the number of questions you have per day. I typically did 2 or 3 blocks a day. So a block is 40 questions. So, you know, you do the math. One of the things that I highly, highly recommend is do not sleep on micro, do not sleep on biochem, and especially do not sleep on ethics and biostats. If you learn biostats a little earlier in your medical career, maybe in like year 1 or year 2, I would start right now and start going back and looking at your biostatistics, all those equations, getting familiar with it, and all those ethics questions that, you know, no one really takes the time to look at, but there's a really good section in first aid for that. I can't tell you how high yield biostatistics and ethics were. There was so many questions on my test about that, you know, thankfully I prepared for them, but a lot of people, you know, kind of overlook that. Another thing with biochemistry is also really high yield, but it's also strictly pure memorization. So I'd recommend hitting it first and then last. So doing it really early on in your dedicated and then doing it really late in your dedicated. So just to make sure that you have it all down. Another thing I recommend is trying to get a specific pathway, whether it be like glycolysis or the TCA cycle or anything like that. What I would do during my dedicated is I would, every 2 or 3 days, I would just draw out one pathway on a whiteboard. So there's just little things that you can do to help you remember. And really, it's the little things that really make that score. And can I switch to the next slide, please? And like Faustine said, she was talking about the practice test, but in reality, your MBMEs are your best predictor of your score. At one point, one of the last MBMEs I took was the exact score I got on Step 1. Also, if you do end up purchasing the full UWorld subscription, it does come with 2 tests. I find those tests to be very, very helpful and very, very accurate of a predictor of your score. Like Faustine said, about 5 to 10 points, give or take. But you should definitely use them as a baseline. So the first thing you should do before you even start your dedicated is to take an MBME just to see where you're at. And when I did MedSchoolCoach, I actually did do the program, and I'm very thankful for that. But you know, my tutor had me do an MBME my very first day of dedicated. And from the first day to the last day, once a week I did them, and I could just see the progress happening. And it's really good to see that. So, you know, if you're seeing yourself progress, you know, it's a good confidence booster. It means that you're doing things right. And if you're not seeing yourself progress, you know that what you're doing needs to change, and then it gives you some leeway to change up your study schedule. Basically, I call what's called 220 and 230 and 240 and then 250 information. A lot of people kind of have their own idea of what kind of information they need to know, but The 250 kind of information are those little sentences in first aid that you don't really think you need to know. But trust me, if you're trying to get that 250 or plus, those kind of things are the things you need to make a note card out of. And if they show up on a practice test, it's something that you really need to make a note of. Can I go to the next slide, please? So this is a really important slide, what I wish I had known. You know, studying should feel like work. You know, it kind of sounds really repetitive, but that really is the thing. Studying should feel like work. You should be going in, doing what you're supposed to do, and then finishing, and then not worrying about it once you're done. Having a go-to relaxation technique is really important. You know, Faustine talked about walking in the morning. There's relaxation techniques. For me, I love video games or just watching football. Another big thing, this is huge, turning off social media was a huge time saver for me. When I woke up in the morning, you know, at first I would scroll through Facebook or Instagram for like, you know, 10 or 15 minutes. And then at night right before I went to bed, I would scroll through Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. I found that to be really time wasting, and it kind of affected my sleep in my morning. I really, really recommend turning off social media during your dedicated. I think that's going to be a huge help on your studying. Definitely communicate with your friends and family. You know, if some nights you have to go out for a dinner, you know, and you need to take off a couple hours, like it's not going to kill you. That's definitely just as important for your mental health and to avoid burnout. And if I could do the test again, the DIT videos that I used weren't really as great as I thought they'd be. I definitely like Boards and Beyond more. And like I said, doing UWorld times twice or another question bank. If you do end up exhausting your UWorld, which I really hope you don't, but if you do, you can switch to another question bank like Qbank or USMLE RX. And I think with that, we're going to go back to Joel, right?
Yeah, we're going to head back to Joel in a second here. So quick question for those of you guys that are out there. I mean, we've gone over a couple of things and in terms of studying. So we want to know, what resources are you planning on utilizing for your study time? And obviously, you know, everybody's going to utilize some combination of resources, but I want to kind of hear what you guys are thinking about. There's a lot of resources out there, and Joel's going to, I think, maybe home in and talk a little bit about what some of the best ones are, how to figure it out. I'll definitely tell you that I've seen a lot of students that struggle the most with figuring out what to use and end up using too many things. So they wonder, okay, what is the best pathology book I can use? Is it Golion or is it Pathoma? Is it this or is it that? And they spend so much time worrying about exactly which book to use that they don't actually read either book. The reality is that most of the resources out there are pretty good and will get you where you need to be. But I see just a lot of people who sit around and basically don't get the material that they need, don't get the information that they need, because they are actually spending so much time utilizing and thinking about what resource to use rather than just using whatever resource that they have. And this is interesting. I mean, a lot of you guys out there are thinking about taking a course, and I presume that means sort of an in-classroom course. A lot of people are saying, okay, I'm going to use some video series, which I think are great. Again, when I took the boards, there was actually no video series, didn't exist. And there were others with books and private tutoring. So Joel, maybe I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about common pitfalls.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mehta. So I'll go ahead and talk about common pitfalls of preparing for step one. So if we go ahead and go to the next screen, we so often see that students come to us using too many resources. So students will come to us saying, you know, I have UWorld, I have USMLE RX, I have First Aid, Golion, Doctors in Training, you know, and they'll list this big long list of resources. And so it actually at that point becomes counterproductive, because you have this long list of resources, but you don't have enough time to really delve into any of those resources. So that leads to what we call dabbling. So people dabbling in each resource, but not spending enough quality time with each one. When you dabble in each resource, you're really harming yourself. You're not able to maximize the resources that you're using. And so would really help you hone in on the handful of resources that work for you. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with using multiple resources or Doctors in Training or Doctors in Training and First Aid, but different people learn in different ways. And it's important to figure out in what way you learn, choose a handful of resources that are going to complement that, and then really maximize them. And most importantly, do not be influenced by others. So I can't remember how often people tell me, well, I was in the library and I saw this person using this book or using this book, and then they'll go out on Amazon and they'll buy that book, maybe spend an hour or two reading it, and they aren't really able to benefit from that resource. So the next common pitfall is getting distracted. So all too common, people veer off their study plan. So there's a reason you created a study plan, and you want to make sure that you stick to that study plan. If sticking to that study plan is really going to help you make sure that you cover what you need to cover. And then it's also going to prevent you from missing things. So if you stay true to your study plan, and your study plan includes all these resources that you want to cover, then that's going to make sure that sticking to that study plan day to day is going to get you through all those resources. Poor study environment, you want to make sure that you're in a place where you can concentrate. That's different from everybody. Sometimes that's at home where, you know, mom and dad can cook for you and provide for you. Sometimes that's at your home institution. Sometimes that's with your partner. You really take some time to reflect on where you study the best and make sure you put yourself in that environment. And then poor time management, that is actually really similar to veering off the study plan. You want to be realistic with your study plan and make sure that you have actually the time, the adequate amount of time to finish that study plan. And then not being realistic. So attempting to use too many resources. If you think, some people come in saying, I'm going to get through UWorld 5 times in those 2 weeks, you want to make sure you don't do that. You want to make sure, I know Faustine and James had mentioned this, but you want to make sure you keep time and you build time into your schedule for family, friends, and rest. Burnout is real. Studying for 12 to 14 hours a day is very challenging. Doing that for 4 to 6 weeks is very challenging. Just a little bit of time every day, or a little bit of time every week, and it might seem like an upfront investment of your time, but in the long run, it's very beneficial to your success. And then not enough forethought. So you don't want to be a week before your exam and realize that you need help. The sooner you reach out for help, whether that is to us, whether that is to knowledgeable friends, or whether that's just self-reflection, the sooner you'll be able to identify weaknesses, and the sooner you'll be able to act on those weaknesses. So I think that we already spent some time talking about best resources, so we'll go ahead and skip this slide. I think James, Faustine, and I had a chance to talk about what we thought was important. Next, I want to briefly talk about how does one-on-one tutoring fit in. I want to make sure that we have at least 15 minutes for question and answer in order to get your questions, but I would like to talk about what role might one-on-one tutoring play. So we have extensive experience not only taking this exam and doing well, but helping others do well. And so we really focus on the individual student. And one of the benefits of one-on-one tutoring is you get completely personalized tutoring. So I don't think there's one time that I can recall in medical school in which I had one-on-one attention, you know, and at the best it goes into a small group of 10 to 12 people. With one-on-one tutoring, you are getting personalized attention, someone who can help build a study plan and help choose resources that are going to be tailored just for you. We also specialize in approaching questions. So do you have challenges approaching questions? There are systematic ways to approach these questions, and we have a lot of experience not only doing it, but teaching it. We provide a completely personalized experience from day one. So we can provide we can help create a study plan with you. We help create a scientific foundation. So just covering the basics of physiology. We also can help you with practice questions. We help with repetition. And then finally, we help with actually taking the test. So how do I take this test? When do I take my breaks? Should I eat? Should I take coffee? When should I take the test? Should it be at my home institution? Should it be at my university? And these are all things that we have a lot of experience with and can help guide you through. So these are a few ways that we do that. Again, most importantly, is we personalize everything. Everything is personalized completely to you. There's no one size fit all, there's no cookie cutters. We recruit tutors who have not only excelled on the exam, but are wonderful teachers. They're kind, empathetic, compassionate people who are committed to your success and committed to your education. They have a lot of experience on how to learn high yield material and how to retain high yield material. So instead of dabbling in a bunch of resources, we're going to be able to help you identify important resources, identify the most important information, and identify ways in which you can learn that most important information. And the goal of this is for you to score higher and for you to get a better score and for you to be able to pursue the specialty that you want to pursue. The way it works is you would get paired with a tutor. Usually we pair you with one tutor, but depending on your needs, you might be paired with multiple tutors. You then work with your tutor one-on-one to find out times that work for you. So you can meet with your tutor whenever, wherever, based upon your availability and his or her availability. Our tutors utilize multiple kinds of sessions. They use content-based sessions, they use question-based sessions, and then most importantly is they will utilize a education strategy in a session that's going to work for you. This is all personalized. We focus on you. And so as you get to know your tutor and as your tutor gets to know you, we will be able to adapt to your needs and provide you with what you need. And again, the goal of this is for you to score higher. That is our goal. We have the same goal. We have a few guarantees. If you get paired with a tutor and for some reason you think that you would work better with a different teaching style, you can switch tutors at any time. Although this very rarely happens, it is an option if you would like. If you're not satisfied with the package that you've gotten or with the tutoring that you've gotten, you can get the rest of your hours refunded. Again, very rarely happens. We also have a score increase guarantee depending on the package you get. If your pre-tutoring MBME score does not increase by greater than 10 points at the end of your session, we'll give you 10 hours for free. So this is a sign of our commitment to you and our commitment to the goal of you improving your score. And so we have information. If you're more interested in hearing more information, you can email info@medschoolcoach.com. We'll also send a follow-up email to this webinar in which you can reach out to us to get all your questions answered. Great, well, thank you everybody. We're gonna go ahead and switch now to the question and answer. I see multiple question and answers here, or questions here. So let me go ahead and we can pull up a few. Let's try. So let's try this question. This is a question by Nina. It says, I've been told by some people that UWorld should be used to test your knowledge. So use it only once during the dedicated study time. But I've also heard that doing the whole bank twice is better. So I'm not sure how to decide. I'm going to go ahead and send that question over to James because I know he had mentioned doing the Qbank twice. So James, do you see any benefit in doing the Qbank twice?
Yes, I definitely see a benefit of doing UWorld twice. A lot of people say that, you're going to memorize the answers, but to me, I never found that to be the case. I memorized the concepts, which is more important than memorizing the answers. So, if I didn't know a concept about cardiology, I would have gotten that wrong. I would have went over it. And then the next time around, I would have remembered the concept and understood the concept, and that would have had me more efficiently get to the right answer. There's a huge benefit in doing UWorld twice. I really think that everyone should do it twice. The first time, if your percentages aren't too high, don't worry about it. You should really start worrying about your percentages more into your dedicated study time.
Great, thanks, James. Here's a question. We'll start with Jamshed. The ones who got high scores, did they do one-on-one tutoring? So I'll actually take that question myself. So we have excellent feedback with our students. Students are very happy with their tutoring experience. They're very happy with the scores they've gotten. We work with a range of students. Some students have some students with different goals. Some students have a goal of just passing, and some students have a goal of getting a 250 or 260. We have a 98% positive feedback rating on our online rating. So I think the answer to that question is a little challenging, in which it's since we offer personalized tutoring, everyone's situation is different. But what I can say is by far the majority of students who work with us are very happy with their outcome.
And I could jump in there, Joel, for a second and say that, listen, not everybody out there needs one-on-one tutoring, right? I mean, most people will do fine actually by themselves. But there's a large portion of students out there who either are struggling with a test or need to get that 240, 250 or above. And that's where I think that one-on-one attention can really make that huge difference. And people don't understand it until they get it, right? There's a lot of great resources, as Joel, Fasmi, and James already mentioned, out there for people to score really high on the boards. And if you are, taking an NBME test and you're getting a 250, all power to you. You're going to do fine. And you're going to be okay. But if you're getting a 220 or 210 and you want to match into ophtho or ortho or IR or something, you got to get your score higher. Or if you want to match into, MGH for internal medicine, you got to get your score higher. And it's those people who I think can really benefit and often don't see the benefits until that they actually participate in it. Use all the resources that are out there. There's a ton. But if you're struggling, if you're stuck, if you're plateauing, if you're having trouble with a particular subject, or you even having trouble just getting at what a question is answering or asking, that's when somebody sitting down with you who knows the test, knows the material, has gone through it and aced it, can really help you take it to the next level. And honestly, take it to the next level far quicker than you otherwise may be able to without that help, right? So you may be struggling for hours and hours and hours just trying to figure out some concept when honestly 45 minutes with somebody who can really teach it well would transform you. And so those are I think not everybody needs this, but if you're struggling, if you're plateauing, if you want to maximize your score, that's when the one-on-one help can really come in.
Great, thank you, Dr. Mehta. Quick question that I can answer right now. Will this webinar be recorded? The answer to that is yes, this will be recorded. Here's a question from Elvis. How much time should I spend studying per day? How can I find a healthy balance of studying medicine and doing my hobbies? And then what is the best strategy to make a review? So I think I'll put that over to Faustine. So again, the question is, how much time should I spend studying per day? How can I find a healthy balance of studying and doing hobbies? And then what is the best strategy to make a review?
Yeah, so I think those are really great and really important questions. So earlier we mentioned, I think during dedicated time, a reasonable expectation is going to be a minimum of 10 hours a day. And we recommend even closer to 12 to 14, depending on the day. Now, obviously, you're not going to study 14 hours every single day for 4 to 6 weeks. It's going to be important for you to build in gaps in that day. So if we were thinking back to the 2 study schedules that we saw, both of those had time built in for some sort of exercise or mindfulness activity, something completely separate from medicine that's important to you. That could be having breakfast every day with your loved ones. That could be, stepping outside after lunch and going to walk around the block. That could be having coffee with your parents, once a week. Whatever it is that brings you joy outside of medicine, do not stop doing those things during your board setting. And I would say I'm going to repeat that. Whatever it is that brings you joy outside of medicine, do not stop it. In fact, I would try to do more of it during board study, because those are going to be the things that prevent you from burning out, and that can help you with your stamina for the dedicated study time, because it is incredibly hard. So I would recommend building in to your study plan at least at minimum a half day off a week. If you are getting to the end of the week and you feel like, this week you might need to take a full day off, that is totally fine. You taking that extra half day off is going to be more beneficial to your long-term studying and your long-term score than you powering through, grinding it out for a few more hours, not retaining much, and then not being fresh for the next day. So, key things, whether it's reading, exercising, whatever makes you happy outside of medicine, keep doing it. Build in, 30 minutes, an hour of it a day, taking completely off at least a half day off a week, and then building a schedule that incorporates those things. And, I think doing an hour by hour schedule is great. I did that. I had an Excel spreadsheet. I would recommend, the same way that James talked about counting out how many questions and how many pages you want to cover in first aid, and creating like a Google spreadsheet with, this is Monday the 20th, and I'm going to do this many hours of this many pages of first aid, this many hours on blocks and reviewing the blocks, this many questions. I'm going to spend 2 hours reviewing my flashcards, 2 hours reviewing my notes from UWorld, 30 minutes here exercising, really like an hour by hour schedule. And I think that helps make all these goals more attainable by creating that type of detailed plan. Does that answer it? That was kind of a 3-part question.
Great. So next question, is there an option for you to provide us or help us create a day-to-day calendar of what we should cover and how many questions to do, et cetera? Or any recommendations on who can help us with that? And I'll go ahead and put that over to James.
All right, thank you. So that was Miriam Osi's question. So the answer is yes, we can definitely help with that. When I did the tutoring with MedSchoolCoach, he basically sat me down and made an Excel sheet with day by day what subject to cover and what to do. And you know, it kind of depends on what you want. If you want someone to plan out every single minute of your day, we can help you with that. If you want someone to kind of give you a general guidance of every day to day, we can also help you with that. And as far as recommendations or for how much we should cover and how many questions to do, yeah, like I said, we can definitely help you with anything that you need in that sense.
Great. So we have a few minutes left. I think we'll try to squeeze in a few more questions. Here's another question directed for you, James. How should one study for STEP during term 5 at SGU?
So great question. So as an SGU grad, it's term 5 is very tough. Basically, term 5 is in SGU is really tough. It is really the whole just encompassing of all of medicine. You know, with pathophysiology and pharmacology. Basically, what I recommend to do is day to day, do URL blocks, do them randomly. During the day, try to supplement your lectures with other outside resources. I really liked Boards and Beyond to help supplement what the lectures wouldn't really cover or didn't explain well enough to me. And then at night, I would do another question bank, probably like USMLE RX or questions on that specific topic that they were covering in lecture. So I followed that lecture schedule. And then every weekend, some friends and I would get together and we draw out some biochemistry pathways, or we go over, you know, all the gram-positive bugs, or we go over all of the biostatistical questions, and we did some ethics cases. It really depends on your weaknesses. You know, coming from SGU, we kind of have a different curriculum than other people. So, like I said, UWorld, Boards and Beyond, USMLE RX, and on the weekends, definitely look over some biochemistry, look over some biostats, and look over some micro. So it's kind of the gist of it. It's a lot. We don't think we have enough time to go into more details, but if you have any other questions, you can always find me and email me.
James, really quickly, since you're already on the line, what is an example of a resource that encourages passive learning, one to avoid? So you had mentioned earlier avoiding passive learning. I think the question is, could you clarify?
So I might offend some people with this, but I personally found Sketchy Micro to be a little bit of passive learning. I just thought that I was just kind of watching it. It might be different for some people. I also found that a lot of the doctors in training videos were kind of just passive learning. You're kind of just listening. You're not really engaged with it. Like I said, Sketchy wasn't really for me. I found it to be very passive, just simply because I can't do the whole, you know, image to information correlation. I found Boards and Beyond to be really good because all the information is so well put, so well presented, and it's just so applicable to the test that it really had me engaged. And also, to the opposite of that, more engaging resources are, like I said, Anki, question banks, Boards and Beyond, Pathoma. But for me, passive learning is something where you're kind of just listening to, and if I ask you a question 5 minutes later, you probably wouldn't be able to answer it. And for me, that was Sketchy and Doctors in Training.
Right, great, thanks, James. To piggyback off that, another question is, do you recommend watching the USMLE RX Express videos instead of reading the first aid book? So I'll go ahead and take that one. I think that is an example of passive learning that James kind of identified. I think it is important to recognize that everyone learns differently. I know some people swear by videos and swear by Sketchy Micro. I think the important thing is to figure out what works for you. So be very honest with yourself. Do you actually learn from videos? Are you actually learning from Sketchy Micro? If the answer to that is yes, then do it. If the answer to that is no, then don't do it. I think the majority of people would agree that using first aid as a book is probably the best resource. You can give the videos a try, but the videos are going to be very similar to the book, and you might find yourself in a place where you're just sitting watching videos and you're not actually learning the material. A quick question, is it okay to use a book that isn't the most recent edition? I think the answer to this is yes. I think in most cases, it's beneficial to have the most recent edition. And if you're able to afford, purchasing another textbook, it likely is worth your money. But if you're using last year first aid, it's probably not going to harm you. Another question, how many cards did you do a day for Anki? I used Anki, so I guess I'll take this one as well. I don't know. James, did you use Anki?
I did use Anki.
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. It really depends on the subject. Like on cardio or for GI, I would probably use like 30 to 40 a day, but I can get to them pretty quickly. But when it came to stuff that I really knew, I would do probably like 10 or 15 a day. And like I said, that was mostly at the end of the night or right before I started my day, just to kind of give me as a warm up. But some people love to learn slowly through Anki. And if that's the case, if that works for you, then you go ahead and do that. And you can do as many cards as you want.
Great. So I'll quickly finish with one more question. How would you recommend implementing Anki in board prep? And did you make your own cards or use a pre-made study bank? So I think that Anki can play a very important role in your studying. Anki is very good at learning small details, of which step one is a lot of small, challenging details. I think that if you use Anki right, it could be a great resource. When I say right, I think we're talking about a few things. I think there is a lot of value to making your own Anki deck. I think the process of making those cards, although will take a long time, is itself an active process. So when you are making these cards, you're highlighting and you're identifying what is important and what do I not understand. And I think that process in itself is an important process. And then to piggyback off what James said, it's really important to make sure that you regularly study these cards. If you're someone who can sit down for 1 to 4 hours every day and do Anki cards and can commit to doing that every day or at least 6 days a week, then do it. If you know yourself and know that you cannot do that, then you probably would be best spending your time doing something else. So I think that takes some introspection and some reflection on essentially your own ability to utilize flashcards. And if you used flashcards in the past, then found it beneficial. There's one last question that we would like to address. This one is for Dr. Mehta, and it's been asked on our Q&A and our chat, so we'll get that answered. But the question is, does undergraduate study play any meaningful role in residency selection or step one?
So does undergraduate study play any meaningful role? I assume this is referencing sort of where you went to undergrad, what your activities were, et cetera. And the answer is really no. Doesn't play any role whatsoever. Unless you were, let's say, did a whole bunch of research in undergrad in orthopedic surgery and were applying into orthopedic surgery. Otherwise, really, the residency selection process is very limited to what you've done in medical school. And it's not like the med school application process where we're looking for activities and volunteer work and shadowing and all that. It's really sort of focused in on a few things, the few things I mentioned, obviously step 1 score, step 2 score, letters of recommendation, research, and maybe sort of your clinical interest in a particular field or what you've done. Those are really what goes into the selection criteria, and not so much activities or what you did in undergrad.
Excellent, thank you. So I think that pretty much wraps up how much time we have for the questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of them. I think we got to about 80% of them. We are available and we are always looking to take on new students. So if you're one of those students who Dr. Mehta had mentioned who thinks they might benefit from this, or if you would like to spend some time one-on-one with one of our tutors creating a study plan or talking more about resources, then you are welcome to email us. We'll also send an email out after this with all the information that you would need to contact us. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope that it was valuable for you. We hope that you were able to take out some really concrete, useful information. And then we really hope that you are able to do as well as you'd like on this exam. And we wish you the best of luck.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.